And I got this camera in my hands and I just looked at it like, how am I gonna figure this thing out? What's up, y'all? How is everyone doing? So today I'm coming to you live from Oregon. Myself and Chris House are here for the Sony condo trip part 3. Look at this place that Sony hooked us up with. This is pretty amazing. So basically, Sony invited me out to this trip about 2 months ago, and I asked them, hey, is this like a sponsored thing? And they said, no, we just want you to come be with like-minded individuals, have the chance to take some classes, and just experience it. And it's been a great experience for sure. So I'm thankful that Sony invited me out here. This is awesome. And I've gotten to try out this crazy camera, the Sony a7R Mark IV. So that's what we're gonna be talking about today. We're gonna go over what my perspective is on this camera being a non-Sony user. I've only used one Sony full frame camera before. It was Chris's Sony a7 III. And y'all know that I've kind of trolled Sony in the past. I've made jokes. The Sony users are just too easy to rile up. So every now and again, I'll throw a little troll comment out there and people take it too seriously. But in reality, cameras for me are tools. And if the camera does the job well, I'm completely fine with it. And after I used Chris's Sony a7 III a few months ago and made a video about it, it's pretty obvious. You know, they're incredibly capable machines. And this thing, it's one of the most capable, crazy cameras I think I've ever used in my entire life. So I want to break down what you can expect as someone who's never used Sony if you're thinking about switching, if you want to pick one up, if you want to try it out, and what to keep in mind so you don't get frustrated switching over to a camera like this Sony a7R IV. So first off, let me tell you kind of about this condo trip and why we're here. So every year Sony does a retreat type workshop trip for basically like-minded individuals, people who are in the camera industry, who make YouTube videos, who are on Instagram, just a way to bring a lot of different people together. One of the craziest people who is here is the guy who made that iconic Muhammad Ali photo where he's standing over, I believe that's Sonny Liston. I'm not 100% sure on that, but he's here. That guy is here right now, so it's pretty crazy. Me and Chris, we took some classes from DJI, we took some classes on YouTube. Chris is currently at a cooking class right now. As we go through this video, there's not gonna be a ton of structure. I'm just gonna talk, explain the things that I've noticed, some observations, and also show as much content on the screen as I can. Now bear in mind, because we've been going to classes and meeting people and doing stuff, there's no direct narrative to any of this footage. I've just been shooting and creating as much as I possibly can while trying to figure out this camera. So any nuanced details about picture profiles or how the footage is shot or anything like that, I'll include in little blurbs down at the bottom. So let's get into this. First thing I want to talk about, this camera, it does everything very, very well. Like even the microphone. Can you tell that my voice sounds better? Whatever amp or tech is processing the sound inside this camera, it's great. It's really good. And I'm sure if you're watching this video, you know most of the specs on this camera. You're getting over 60 megapixels, you're getting 4K video, you're getting this extreme dynamic range. And all these factors coming together, they can be overwhelming. You know, I use my camera every single day. I use it for work, I use it professionally. And I got this camera in my hands and I just looked at it like, how am I gonna figure this thing out in basically 2 days? So I started with getting a 35mm f1.4 lens because it's a little more familiar to lenses that I've used on other camera systems. So I could control the aperture through a ring. So that helped me out. So if you plan on switching, maybe start with a lens that's a little more familiar so it's less of an overwhelming, thing to get this camera. But on the first day that I had it, I didn't make a single photo. I just kept staring at it, going in the menu, trying to figure out, okay, what am I looking at? What's this? What's that? And I think that's a common frustration with people when they switch over to a new camera or they try a new camera. They think that this is bad or this isn't good, it's not working for me, just because it's something new and different, it's not familiar. And yeah, you want something familiar, obviously, if you're using your camera for work, but also just remember, let's say I switched over to this Sony, I gotta give myself like a month to really use it and understand it. And even on this trip, I've been using it nonstop. I feel like I've barely scratched the surface on the true capability of a camera like this. So keep that in mind. If you decide to switch over to a tool that is super powerful, it's gonna take you a little while to figure out how to maximize that tool for you and get the best result out of it. So I tried a bunch of stuff with the higher dynamic range picture profiles on this camera. Picture profile 9 is a super flat picture profile. So I went out and recorded a bunch of video in that, and then I switched over to picture profile 5, recorded some stuff in that, did some test color grades, which right now we're filming in picture profile 5. I think it's just like a nice happy medium for someone like me who does a lot of YouTube videos. You can get a color grade on this footage, but it's not that crazy flat profile you get on something like a picture profile 9, so the grading is a little easier. But yeah, like basically, if you plan on switching, for me, I found the best thing you can do is try something, come back, check it, go out, try something else, come back, check it, and just learn. Now, when it comes to a super high resolution camera like this, for me, it felt like it shot a lot like medium format. I've used multiple medium format cameras in the past, and this feels a lot like it. One, because of the file size. If you're like most people, if you're like me, you don't want to have a million hard drives. You don't like dealing with the process of file transfers and all that stuff. It's a reality of being a professional creator, but also it's something you want to minimize as much as you can. So when your files come out of this camera at 150 megabytes each, you're conscious of that when you're out shooting, and it does kind of slow down the shooting process. And I think for the most part, if you're someone using a camera with this level of resolution, you're gonna be capturing images that need to be at that resolution, and those are usually shots that are thought out a little bit more, or at least in my opinion. And I found myself doing that while I was using this camera. I kind of slowed down. I wasn't, running off a million shots. I was taking maybe 80 or 100 photos in a night, as opposed to maybe on another camera where I'm just shooting a bunch and not thinking too much. I might make 350, 400 photos. So that's one thing I noticed. When you have this crazy high resolution and you're aware of the file size and the implications of shooting a lot, it changes the shooting experience, which for me is a positive. And depending on who you are and how you process your files and everything, it could be a positive for you, or it could be a negative because you make a lot of photos and now you got to figure out the storage. And this same medium format feeling transfers over to when you're editing the files. There's so much data on each file that it's almost like a blank canvas. You can almost do too much to the photos if you want. And I just found that when I was editing them, the files were very responsive because of that extreme resolution and also the dynamic range you're getting on the files. So that was cool. Let's talk kind of about how the camera feels in your hands, because like I said, I've never had one of these for more than an hour. So one thing that's cool that Chris was showing me is all the different customizable buttons on the camera. If you're used to one other system and you want to ease the transition over to something like this, you can always kind of reconfigure the buttons in certain ways to match up with what you're used to. I don't know if y'all feel like this, but for me, using a camera is almost like a rhythm. You get used to your hand being here, you do this, and you kind of just move your fingers in a certain way and it becomes second nature. So that's one of the big shocks to the system when you switch over to a different camera. In the past, I have trolled the Sony battery life. That's one thing I've always joked about. This battery on this camera lasted me 2 days of shooting photo, video, high resolution 4K. So whatever was going on in the past that caused Sony batteries to drain on me in the cameras I did use, which were things like the A6000, 6100, 6200. I don't know if those are different batteries. Don't go crazy on me in the comments. I don't use Sony, but whatever was causing those batteries to die super fast, it's not a problem with the battery in this camera. It's been really, really good and really impressive. Let me think, man, what else is there? Is there anything else that really came to mind? The camera feels super tough. It feels like a brick. It's got good grip. The menu system, I don't think is bad. I think it's just not familiar with me. I'm not used to it. I would say all in all, as someone who doesn't use Sony, and my perspective on this camera is it's the most all-around capable camera I think I've ever used, and it blew away pretty much any expectation that I had coming here, and I have some real serious things to think about. I haven't really, I don't know, done a lot of upgrades to my main camera setups. I've done like a lot of stuff off to the side. If you follow the channel, you know about that. But the main camera I've used and the main lenses and everything I've had since the minute I started my YouTube channel years ago. And the longer I do this, the more I'm getting to the point where I need to make some decisions on, you know, where is everything going in the future. And using this just for this short time has really, you know, it's really made me think. We'll see what the future could bring. But I think that's it. I've like rambled so much. There's so much footage in this camera that I'm gonna have to cut down. But yeah, this has been a cool trip. It's been an eye-opening experience getting to use this thing, and that's my perspective on the Sony a7R Mark IV from a non-Sony user. So if you enjoyed the video, hit that thumbs up for me, hit that subscribe button for more. Today was more of a sit-down video, but I do have a little vlog type thing that I shot on the Sony RX100 that will probably be out on Monday. So thank you guys so much for watching. You know the truth. I appreciate it, and I'll see you next time.